Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Today we're looking at BNB, or basically the Binance Smart Chain, and because we have so much data with BNB, we're going to be taking a look at it at a more macro scale, kind of comparing what happened cycle to cycle. Now as you can see, we have just about 2 cycles here. BNB launched in 2017, so we have about 7 years of data. And zooming in on what happened first cycle, when Binance launched, we can see we had a spectacular start, moving from real lows to real highs and putting in cataclysmic sort of 3,000% moves in the first few weeks of launch. And then from that high to the next one, we put in another 700% move. It finally slowed down, however, around this high, but we can see not too soon after having a sharp drop, we did come back up close to these levels, more or less putting in a top. And note that I kind of start counting BNB from this high. This is where we're measuring from. So 22 weeks later, we put in our double top, our second top, and then 25 weeks after that, we put in our low, our bear market low, if you will. BNB then puts in another high 28 weeks later. And then as you can see, measuring from the top, it's another basically 100 weeks from this high, the final peak of the first cycle, before moving to the second peak in the second cycle, this green. And we can see that I'm equating this to this. It's kind of a whole cycle is completed at this point and we're back to repeating ourselves. Now there is a different way of looking at this, and that is measuring it from going from this high to this low. And then instead of measuring from this low to this high, we measure from this low to the next low. And we can see that gives us a more even split of about 60 weeks each side. Notice that this side is slightly longer. It's not that important, but it kind of splits it down the middle from this low to this high here. And ultimately from this green to this green, that takes place over 173 weeks. So you might be wondering why we split it in two here, and that will be explained right now as we take a look at this cycle. We can see from green to purple, 26 weeks. Notice it's slightly longer. Here it was 22, here it was 26. From purple to white, from the high, the double top, to the low, it's 32 weeks. Notice again, slightly longer, another 7 weeks extra here. We then have the same measurement from this low to the high, it's 103 weeks. So a big discrepancy here compared to last cycle. And then after that, we don't know because we're considering this the high at the moment. This is the highest point Binance has ever been, recently put in a new all-time high. And we can see over the last 2 weeks, we had a bit of a sell-off. That doesn't mean we're now going to trend downwards, but technically this is the highest point Binance has ever been at. So I'm counting it as this high here because we don't have enough data yet. And then after that, we get, an unknown amount of time afterwards before our next high after that. But if that is our high here, we could expect some kind of a downward trend for a while, potentially 98 weeks, 2 years later. Or we can kind of measure it from low to high, like we did down here as well, low to high. We can see that again, it's a very similar even split, but notice both are actually longer than the previous cycle. From white to pink, it was 69 weeks compared to 66. And then from pink to green, the end of the next bull run, we can see it's another 60 weeks. Here it's, well, we don't know yet, but currently it's around 30 weeks, 35 weeks we can see is what we've currently gotten from this low to this high. Now, if you're following this type of a model, where you're measuring from low to next bull run, it suggests that we haven't peaked yet, and we're going to keep rallying for roughly another 25 weeks. And if we do keep rallying for another 25 weeks, you could argue that we'll put in the high for this bull run around December time of 2024, basically end of this year. However, if you want to measure it the way this first cycle went, where we go from low to high to low to high, and you think that's how we're going to play out, you're looking at potentially seeing the next bull run peak being in 2026 of April. Now, I think this is wrong, personally. I don't actually believe either of these, but I think we're most likely due a bull run before then. It's just interesting to see that if we compare what's happened to previous cycles, it gives quite drastically different results. So it's not always something you can rely on. Even if technically things like time frames and percentage moves from certain highs, we can see from blue to pink, we dropped 82% first cycle. We can see blue to pink, it was a drop of 71% this cycle. Even though things are very similar, applying one small different way of looking at things can change the outcome drastically. Now, it could be neither of these. I think we'll probably bottom out around the end of this year and rally for 2025 and stay roughly within the 4-year cycle. Note, however, that roughly it was 173 weeks from this green high to this green high. If we bring that across 173 weeks, we can see that we roughly, from this week onwards, have about 10 weeks to put in our all-time high. 10 weeks to put in, to keep climbing, basically. If you're going to bring it down to the T, now I think it's stupid to measure things in exacts. I think it's a good place marker. I don't think you should put money on something playing out exactly the same as before. To me, what this says is that we've had similar starts, we get our low, and instead of having this sort of minor bull run, I say minor even though Binance put in a new all-time high, if we measure from the low to the high, we can see it was an 800% move. So for an altcoin, that's not actually too major. So I would consider this a minor bull run. We just didn't really get that minor bull run except for here. And if we take a look at how far we move, we can see it was nowhere near what we got here. So in my opinion, I think these moves from white to blue is actually equivalent the same as pink to blue this cycle, and potentially we put another 1 or 2 legs higher. Maybe we come up to $800, I don't know, a kind of 300% move, but ultimately I think we will have a bit of a pull down. And we can see that if you measure from this high to the low, Binance dropped for 38 weeks after this. If we assume that this is the high, even though it could go on for a bit longer, if you take 38 weeks exactly from there, that puts you early 2025. Again, I don't think it's smart to assume that it'll take exactly 38 weeks like last time. You could say it could take 34 weeks, 33 weeks, and that would put you early January, only taking a couple of weeks off. Something to remember is that we've had it longer so far. Every move that we've had from the first cycle has taken longer to play out this second cycle. So you can either look at it like, okay, well, it's got to squeeze into this kind of 4-year time frame, so we've got to sacrifice time somewhere, and therefore this bear market that we're going to get is going to be a lot shorter than the one we got here. So where this one was 38, this one might be 30. It's kind of equalized the weeks. Or you could argue that, well, if everything else has been longer, most likely the bear run is going to be longer as well. We might get something like 41, 42 weeks. That would put you bottoming out in March of 2025. Personally, I think we are going to see some kind of bad action, not just for Binance, but for the whole crypto space. We can see that we've kind of been rejected off this high multiple times. And this here, what we've recently had, is most definitely a rejection. We wicked above, we didn't close up here. And now we're trading down and we found support at this $565 level. Ultimately, I think we'll break down below this. I think we will keep dropping, we will keep trading down. And like I said, I think we will bottom out sometime around the end of the year. If we do have a mini bear run, we can see that, again, last time we dropped 82% from blue to pink. If you want to assume that we're again going to drop 82% from this high, that would bring you down to a low of $130 for BNB. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we'll go that low. I actually don't think we'll go as low as we did back in the depths of the bear run when we had close to $200 for a BNB, and technically we wicked below it. Down here we had $190 for a BNB. I don't think we're going to come near that. I'd say $300 is probably the low for me. We can see that we had a bit of a support here, and this oftentimes acted as a resistance as well. I don't think we'll go below $300 personally, but that's just what I think. I think that we will have a shorter bear run because it's shorter. I don't think we'll drop as drastically as we have done before. If we take a look at kind of what happened from the 2021 bull run down to the 2022 bear run, we can see that was like a 68% drop from the high. A 68% drop would again bring us down to $230. I don't think we'll get that, but that's just me personally. You kind of have to decide these things yourself. Assuming we bottom out sometime January, February, March of next year though, that would line up with most likely when the Fed will have finished cutting rates. We'll be in QE, money will be flowing into crypto, and hopefully everybody will be making lots of money, but we'll have to wait and see for that time when it comes. Looking at the Bitcoin chart, we can see this chart is not as cluttered. However, there are a few key things that I want to look at, and I'm going to leave you with an ultimatum on where you think it could go with the Bitcoin pair. We can see that on the Bitcoin chart, Binance during its first cycle peaked out in April of 19 against Bitcoin, and then continued to trade down until it put in a second high a year and a half later, 74 weeks later. And this took place across the halving. So from high to lower high, 74 weeks, halving somewhere towards the end of it. If we take a look at what's happened here, we can see again, slightly longer, 82 weeks in total here, and note that it was 56 weeks before the halving when we put in this first high, 18 weeks afterwards. Here we can see it was 76 weeks before the halving when we put in this high, and then a much shorter 6 weeks. So they do come to a similar time frame, but notice there's a very big discrepancy in how earlier it started. So this is where the left translated cycle theory kind of rears its head a bit. And these moves do look really similar in terms of just how far we fall and also the strength of the return rally. Now, when we put in this second high, we can see that we dropped 65% from the high, or equivalently, we dropped 34% at the price we were at during the halving. Now, if we take both of those measurements and take a look at where they'd place us, we can see we'd either drop, if it was at the halving, we'd drop down to about 5,600, 700 Satoshis, or if it was the 65% drop from the high, that would bring us down to about 35,000 Satoshis. And you might be wondering why I've drawn these big blue lines here. Well, if we take a look at where we roughly bottomed out previously, it was after one of the final leg up before we put in our high. And we can see here that we got kind of it was just before our final legs up before we put in our high. Now Binance continued to trade up on its Bitcoin pair over the bear market, which was really impressive, as it did its first cycle as well, which is very interesting. But just know that when we bottomed out, it was roughly around the peaks that we got from the move that came before our final bull run leg up on the Bitcoin pair. So again, with that knowledge, looking at the 34% move down and the 65% move down from the high, we can see that probably the 65% move down from the high looks more realistic compared to what we saw last time here, where it doesn't reach the tops, doesn't reach the highs here. It kind of cuts it somewhere just below, and it looks different to the 35% drop that we saw last time, where we're not at these highs like we are here, we're below them like we did see with this. However, the case for the 35% drop, we have obviously rallied much earlier than usual compared to the halving. So you could say that the price we have this halving is not a realistic measurement of where BNB would usually be against Bitcoin during the halving. Perhaps we'd have more of a price down here, and bringing like a 34% drop to this guy would put us at basically similar valuations anyway. They'd kind of agree with each other. So I would more lean personally towards seeing a 65% drop from the highs, wherever that might be, whenever that might be, after the halving. Probably sooner rather than later, but ultimately I don't know. Again, we see here that we got very strong moves down. We don't necessarily have to replicate the strength of these moves down. Another thing to note is that we got these highs in early September. That is literally just 1 or 2 months away in terms of seasonality. So maybe we might rally until July and then kind of get a summer lull like we often do see, and capitulate down for basically the rest of the year. We can see that we did basically drop for 15-16 weeks, around 110 days. So 15-16 weeks out from where we currently are, or from the high roughly, again puts us towards the end of the year, puts us end of September, October time, when we could be seeing that low and then seeing Binance pick up against Bitcoin. What kind of a move could you expect from BNB against BTC? Well, if you check previously, we can see after the last halving we made a move of 1000%, really impressive. And funnily enough, we continued to trend up against Bitcoin over the bear market. So BNB really held its weight up until 2023 basically, where for whatever reason it trended down. There was a lot of stuff with CZ and Binance at this time coming out. I think he got charged by the American government or SEC. I'm not quite sure. Basically stuff came out, but it's not a complete fluke because we can see Binance also trended up, and then somewhere around a year before kind of the halving, it went and traded down. So this isn't too unusual, and maybe next cycle you might consider holding BNB and BTC, as BNB seems to perform well against Bitcoin over the first bear market year. That's probably something you need to look into yourself though. And again, altcoins carry more risk than Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the kind of big OG, and very few alts have outperformed Bitcoin in the long term sustainably. So, you know, who knows how long BNB can continue to do that. Maybe it'll be for ages, maybe it'll kind of die this cycle. I ultimately don't know. But if you're going to, again, assume a similar kind of return against Binance, and assume that we do go down to this low, from this low, a 500% move, so half of the move that we got last time, would bring you to 0.02 Bitcoins, which is really, really strong. If we take a look at what a 1000% move would look like, it would roughly put you at 0.038 Satoshis. Sorry, Bitcoin, 0.038 Bitcoins. I, however, probably don't think we'll see a move like that with the BNB chain, just because it is such a high market altcoin. It's number 4, I'm pretty sure. It's the one below Ethereum. I find it hard to see one of the blue chips really rallying up that much against Bitcoin. I could be wrong, however. Let me know in the comments if I am. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike too. That's totally fine. Let me know how I can improve. Also consider checking out the Twitter and the Reddit down in the description below. And also click this video up here, because Google AI gods think you'll like it. And hey, when has Google ever been wrong, you know? So click that video or click my face up here if you want to go check out the channel. Maybe go find other altcoins more specifically that you might want a price prediction for. Thanks very much. Take care, guys, and peace.